would like to start my story with a question. And that question is something I've thought of so often. Who am I? Yes, I'm Madelyn Wilkinson, but what does that even mean? Who am I? Do I have a purpose for even being here? And it's sort of funny because this is a question that I used to dwell on. It used to actually play a very negative role in my life when I did. But now I find myself thriving on pushing the very boundaries of how we define self. And a few months ago, I decided to come here and check out MoMondays for the first time. And I had this moment where I went to introduce myself to someone, and I went, "Hi, my name is," I don't know if I want to say Madeline or Maddie. And that might sound really odd, but I found that at a very young age, depending on the situation I was in, I would go by different variations of my name. And so, for example, Madeline always sort of showed up when I was playing music, or my teachers would always refer to me as Madeline. But Maddie was always playing sports. She was the one playing soccer at recess, and that's what her friends referred to her as. And it wasn't because I liked one more than the other. It was just because they had different energies. And even though I wouldn't have described it like that at the time, I always noticed. I was like, why do I do that when I was younger? And so after that conversation, we sort of fleshed out all of these different identities that I have that are plays on my name. And, well, what does that even mean, and how does that affect my life now? Well, going back, I am not unlike most humans. I want to feel like I'm special, like there's something that I'm meant to do something in this lifetime. And when I was 14, moving into high school, I really was on a high about everything. I was at the height of my hockey career. We had just won the All-Ontario Championships. I was playing on an all-boys hockey team. I was voted assistant captain, and Team Canada was actually there to scout me during that weekend. I was going to an arts high school, enrolled to study my violin further. And at the time, I would have considered myself to be popular and well-liked, and, I felt like I was going somewhere. And then, it's so funny, the contrast between moving into university. Because by the time I got to university, the only thing that I was confident in was the fact that I was a competing athlete. I was playing the top-level hockey, playing against girls on Team Canada, who eventually were on Team Canada, and I was also playing in the top level of soccer as well. And this all changed, and I'll never forget this moment when I walked into the Carleton coach's office after 2 years of being scouted for this team, sitting down, and them cutting me. What? I can't even describe to you the emotional response I got in that moment. And at the time, I was like, well, if I'm not intelligent, if I'm not beautiful or desirable, if I'm not going to be able to take my talents as a violinist anywhere, and now I'm no longer a competing athlete, who am I? I felt like I was nothing. And this manifested in some really unhealthy behaviors, mental thought processes, and unhealthy relationships as well, to the point where I actually got put on academic probation and almost kicked out of school. And so I had a choice. Do I continue trying in this area, or do I move on? And my mom, thank the goddesses she did this, she convinced me to try one more year. And I'm so glad that I did. Because in 3 years, I went from academic probation to graduating with high honors and being prepared to do my master's and eventually doctorate in musicology. And this was all because one professor, as I can only describe as stepping in her light and sharing her authentic self. When I first met her, I was so drawn to her. She made me want to learn. She made me want to learn about myself. And from working with her, I actually started to find different avenues for myself and different facets of my own being that I didn't even realize existed. And what you can't see, and what is so hard to see at the time of what I like to call the human hurricane of emotion, is that at the eye of the storm, there is this beautiful blessing. And I couldn't see this at the time, but I needed to shed that level of attachment to hockey, and I needed to actually get rid of it completely so that I can open up time, space, and energy to start pursuing other dreams of mine and other things. And then I was like, I'm actually an intelligent person. Who knew? It took me until I was 23 years old. And so I decided that instead of pursuing musicology, that I would go to my first original dream, which was to teach children and to teach the youth, because I wanted to be what that professor was for me, that beacon of light, so that they don't walk through life ever feeling like that they're unworthy, that they don't have unlimited potential from what is outside of the classrooms, just as much as what is going on in the classroom. And so how does this wrap up with my identities? Well, since then, I could have told about 5 billion different MoMonday stories because I've done so many different avenues with education. And what I've learned over time is that all of these different talents that I had as a child, they never actually left me. It's just how I chose to attach to them. So even though I'm no longer a competing athlete, well, I didn't get accepted into teachers college to teach music, which I originally wanted to teach at the beginning. I got accepted to teach physical education. And so full circle came around. Now I get to introduce physical literacy to children as young as kindergarten and teach them how to understand sports, how to understand their bodies, how to understand themselves. And so I'm exploring it in a different way. And I'm doing this in many different facets of my life now. And over time, I have really dove into what I like to call ancient wisdom. And what I've noticed about ancient wisdom is that when you look at different cultures and you look at the belief patterns, there's so many consistencies. There's so many things that are repeated for us to learn from. And I find that absolutely fascinating. And the more that I dive into it, the more that I apply what I'm learning into my life, the more that I like to say that the universe and I like to conjure up magic. Because I actually see these visions coming to light. And my different identities allow me to explore all these different facets and allowing them to sort of all coexist with each other, as opposed to just being one, because a lot of people want me to define myself. Why are you writing a song right now? I just want to put out a song. I love to write. Why are you writing a memoir? Well, that's what I want to do. And I promised my students, and the reason why I came to the first MoMondays is because I had a group of students who loved when I told stories. And I promised them, and they asked me if I would go into public speaking. And so I promised them that I would pursue it on behalf of them. So part of this speech is dedicated to those students who also inspire me daily. And no, just give me a sec. And in the end, tonight, you're seeing a healthy mix of a few of my identities. You're seeing Madelyn Sloan, who I identify as the diva. You're seeing Madelyn, the original. And you're seeing a little bit of Miss W, who's the professional teacher. But there's always Miss Maddie in the background. And Miss Maddie, she's a little bit more fiery, and she's a little bit more sassy. And she's just sort of like waiting for her time to step out on stage and push some boundaries. And that will come soon enough. So in the end, during that time period, I realized that there's just so much more to defining myself, and that I don't just define myself as a teacher, I don't define myself as just anything, because now, if those things, as you evolve through life and we evolve through the great mystery, I love how Indigenous communities view life as the great mystery, and as we evolve through all of these changes that happen, when certain doors close and then certain doors open, I'm not so attached anymore to how they play out. Instead, it's more of this deep understanding that there's a reason for this happening. There was a reason why I got cut from that team. And I will be forever grateful that I did. And that's as simple as that. So thank you so much, and have a great